you want to start with like the fear of the diagnosis?
Yes. Because I think I work with a lot of moms and I hear a lot of, well, my child's not autistic because this, and there's such a fear in that
Right. There's
that
so much fear associated with it.
that instead of focusing on, okay, these are the things we're seeing and this is possibly what this is, they look for everything that's not that.
Right.
And it's
And
not
it can be so like you're chasing your tail.
right. And there's no reason to be afraid. I know in the beginning of our journey, we started that our first child that was diagnosed will be 18 in May. So, and he was diagnosed at 22 months. So, um, I know back then it
That's a
was
pretty early diagnosis.
that is an incredibly early diagnosis, which tells you how severe he was. And now at almost 18, he has a job. He goes to the skating rink. He's completely
If I didn't know, I wouldn't know. If I didn't
right.
have other autistic people in my life, then I wouldn't know.
Right. And
It's a
and
lot
we
like Harry.
and we are lucky. We're not every story, and our story is because of early intervention, because I said I don't care what the diagnosis is, but I need to know what this is because I can't help work on what I don't know. And so once we got that diagnosis, I was able to um, find out everything that I could, get all those services. And when you get a diagnosis on a piece of paper, it is a game changer for services.
Oh, it totally is. Because without that, they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to
No,
talk to you. And because they don't want to go through that footwork. They can't work on assumption. But even if there's something going, they usually won't work on assumption.
and now as many kids that we're seeing with sensory processing and all that, and not everything that looks like autism is autism, that is for sure.
Right.
But
Sometimes.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But
Sometimes.
there's many moms I talk to and they're like, well, they give me a list of things and then they end it with, but they're not autistic. And I'm like, from a diagnostic criteria, they absolutely are. And you're not benefiting them by being afraid of that, because then you can bring them to a professional and say, these are the things we're seeing. What can
Right.
you do? My son had full services, and by full services I mean speech, occupational therapy, all a host, everything we could have, early intervention. We had music therapy, we had everything because we had that diagnosis. And I
And
was
you
able
were
to
in what state at the time? You were in Arizona?
I was in Arizona,
Okay.
and now I
But
am in Utah.
so how did you have to go about that? Did you go about that through your public school system? Did you go about that through just through the doctors? Like, how did that show up for you? Because I know
we
we get a lot of questions about that.
We started with the pediatrician, and then we went to a developmental pediatrician, and then once we had a diagnosis, I went to Department of Disabilities, whatever your local is, and
Mm,
they have services. So
nice.
and I help parents in every state find out what their services are and what they can access with their insurance.
Kelly does this. So if y'all need that, she's for hire.
So, um, and I can help you find what services are available in your state, because they do vary state to state. But people don't realize that there's a lot available. We had respite in Arizona. We had 600 hours a year of respite,
So
but
crazy.
this is
That's so
somebody we could
crazy.
hire. So we hired
Right.
a family member that we trusted. So there's a
And
lot.
talk about respite care because I think a lot of people don't even understand what respite is.
Respite is kind of a insurance or state Medicaid funded um, special needs babysitter. So we had a choice, and we've had different kinds of respite. So we were able to hire somebody to come into our home, so we could go out on a date, because the divorce rate for parents of special needs children are astronomical.
Yep.
So
If you don't stay connected, if you're not connected anyways, and this happens, you're going to struggle. If
for
you don't
sure,
stay connected after you get this diagnosis, it's huge. It will ruin your marriage.
it will
So
absolutely
Becca says therapy not covered by school or insurance with the diagnosis. Often they will give scholarships. And
Yes.
there are other programs like we have one here, and I'm thinking it's a nationwide program. It's called TACA. Take something for, maybe if Svetlana's watching, she'll tell me what it stands for. But it is, I thought it was taco at first. I was like, is this some San Diego thing? It's not tacos. It's not. It's TACA. And they have scholarship opportunities. I think it's really about once you have the diagnosis, you have to sit with it, and you have to take yourself away from it. You have to detach from it being your fault, all of that host of things that go
Right.
through your mom guilt mind.
Right.
And then you have to start tackling it. You have to start deciding, okay, this is the information I have. What am I doing with it?
And that's
I
what I
think a
tell
really good
everybody.
movie, a really good movie to watch is Temple Grandin. I
That's
don't
a
know if
really
you've
good
seen
movie.
that.
But
So good.
I I tell everybody, get your diagnosis, have a big pity party, cry
Mm-hmm.
and grieve, because there is a grief process. Because it is hard to see that in black and white, because it makes it very, very final.
It does. It does. I agree. And I think too, there's this idea that we've lost this dream for this child. But here's what I know: losing the dream is harder than losing the reality. And once you lose that dream, then you can create a new one.
Right. And you're really doing a disservice to the child. Had we tried to, not ignore it, but make excuses, well, maybe because, maybe Corey's just not talking because of this, or maybe, he's doing this because of this.
Right.
And or some parents are on the other end, they get really frustrated, and then the consequences come in for things they can't control. For me, it helped me understand how his brain works, so I was able to be more patient. So I was able to say, okay, this is the
Mhm.
autism. Or I could come in and say, no, you're just kind of being a jerk, and I'm allowing this
Right.
because because some moms, and I did it, I went through that thing,
'Cause
oh
that's a
well, he
behavioral
has
thing too, for
autism.
sure.
I made those excuses. Oh, well, and now we have found out through this journey that my husband is autistic. So, I had to look at that and sometimes show him some grace. Like, I know you're a full grown man, and I know you have this job, and you support your family, but I'm going to have to cut you some slack because this is the way that your brain is wired. So it also
Mhm.
helped my marriage understanding that.
I think that's important. I think that's really important. I think too that one of the things that I see, like discipline wise, is that, and it happens because Corey wasn't your oldest. He was child
No,
number 4.
he was child number 5.
Okay, so you had other children. You knew what to expect. Harry was my oldest, so it was really hard for me to separate what was autism from what was Harry.
Right.
And it took me having more children and seeing more children reach those developmental milestones before it was like, oh, wait a minute, a lot of this is autism, or a lot of it's just kid stuff,
Right.
because there's definitely the kid stuff too. So what I end up seeing a lot of is moms that are really worried that everybody needs to know their child has autism. And if they don't, and if we don't make it, concessions for them all over, that it's going to be a problem. And I think that I would steer away from that. And I would absolutely tell, like, teachers, for sure, anybody that needs to deal with your child without you around should know.
Right.
But I think that when we start trying to helicopter and control their play, or we're worried about them constantly, then we have to sort of go, okay, wait a minute, I got to back up, because the only way they're going to learn is to be in some of those situations. The only way they're going to learn is to start to understand themselves, and for you to be able to go back in after something's happened and say, well, let's look at that. Let's take that apart. Let's look at, why she may have gotten mad and walked away when you were in her face. Let's talk about, like those sorts of things, rather than being hovering and being the mom that is constantly worried about them. Because I've been on both sides, you
Right.
know.
Because they'll surprise you. Corey is shockingly bright. It's I
I'm sorry.
I can, give him schoolwork, and he's a senior this year, but when he was younger, I would have his schoolwork for the whole week, but I would say, "Okay, I need to go do this for a few minutes, work on this." And I would mean for the day, and I would come back and he would have the whole week done. And I'm like, "Okay." Well, okay.
They just want to go play Legos.
So, and that is exactly what he wanted to do, was go play Legos.
That's Harry. That's
Yeah.
Harry. Like, what do I need to do? Tell me the whole week. Just want to know.
And they
You're gonna
thrive
make me paint? I'll paint, but I just want to know.
on routine. And I think that's the lot of the moms that are
They
like,
do.
my kids are so out of control, or they're constantly sensory, and they're these behaviors, and they might be on the spectrum, and all that. I came from being a radically unschool mom. By radically unschooling, I mean my children had no bedtimes, they had no meal plans, we had no rules. My house was very,
That's fun, Kelly.
my
Why would you do that to yourself?
very red, because what's funny is my three oldest children were just very chill. Like, they were just very mellow. And I was young. I had my first baby at 17 when she was born. I was
Right.
16 when I got pregnant. So I had a lot of energy and I had this different mindset. But my kids were, I don't know, like, I would pat myself on the back about what an amazing mother I was. Amazing. And I tell everybody, I was a phenomenal mother. And then we had our fourth, and Emily was the best baby, and she slept all the time, and she was darling. And then Corey came and knocked me off my pedestal. And I and then we were had the opportunity to, take in some kinship foster placements.
Right.
And then we had a child that, not only was I knocked off my pedestal, she'd almost beat me to death with it. So
Right.
I have been the mother that just, I'm amazing. And then I've been the one that would, like, who would entrust me with these small humans? Like, I am the worst person for this job. So I had to realize that I had to learn what everybody's needs are and manage that. But I do not, very rarely will you find me like, oh, that's an autistic behavior. I don't give a lot of grace, because, and my child,
Because they have to learn how to be humans in today's world.
right, and Corey has thrived in that, because and I learned a lot. He used to hit me. He was little, and he had an addiction to dairy, and it would make him violent.
Oh,
And
that was
so
Harry.
he
That
would,
was Harry.
yeah, he would come and he would
Yeah.
hit me, and I didn't think much of it because he was 4, and I was like, "Oh, well, he's 4." And I was talking to somebody from Southwest Autism Research Center. We had did some studies and stuff with them, and she said, "Kelly, you realize one day he's going to be 16, right?"
Right.
And I thought, "Oh, there's a visual." And he's 17 now, and he's the tallest person in the house. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad we listened. And I thought, okay, we need to stop
Right.
this behavior now. These things are not okay, and I cannot make excuses for him. And there's times, I will still leave a store, if he was screaming or whatnot, or a restaurant. And we've left restaurants, and I've sat out in the car while my husband has stayed in with the other kids, and he got my food,
Right.
took them out. And a lot of people be like, well, they can act like that, they have autism. That is not an excuse to disrupt everybody around you either. And that is
No,
another thing. Like, no, that's not how that.
I think that's you know, I, I was almost more aware of it. Once I knew what was going on, I was almost more aware of it because I knew the fallout. Like, once you fail a few times and you're like, oh hell, I don't want that to happen again. And then you really are, you are either looking for answers, or you figure them out and you go, okay, I have to make sure that I'm understanding the trigger, that I'm understanding like all of those pieces that fall into place that create the perfect storm. And if you're not paying attention, if your rhythm's not in check, and if you're not in check, you got to be in check, mom. If you're not in check, they will sense it. We sort of laugh about kids being opportunists, and kids on the spectrum aren't opportunists in the same way that other kids are. And I say that all children are good children, but they are all opportunists. But kids on the spectrum, they can feel your energy being off much quicker than other children,
Yes.
because you are their lifeline. They rely on you for everything, for their emotions, for everything. So you're in this space of teaching them how to stand on their own. And that takes time, but they are, if you are off, they'll know. Like, Harry was always the first child to know that there was something going on. And it would show in the way he acted. And so, if we're not in a good place, the
And
house is
that's
gonna be chaos.
And I had to do that when their behavior was ramped up. I had to check in on my own behavior
Right. Right.
because I did hold the space, and we just couldn't keep going on this crazy. As much as free spirited and we everything was great, and we were eating
Right.
Oreos at 2 o'clock in the morning and watching movies, but that wasn't going to work anymore. And then
Right.
Corey was 2.5, and we had services going on, and we had a therapist in the house, and he had said, well, and he was talking about my daughter who's older than Corey. She's about 18 months older than Corey. And he said, when was she diagnosed? And I said, what are you talking about? Because we just knew she was quirky. And so, but we're a house full of quirky people, so I didn't really put it together. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, can I do something? And I said, yeah. She had all her books lined up, all her toys were lined up. And so he went and he moved one when she left the room, and she came back out, and she was just like, what is going on? Like, who's
Like
touching my
beside herself.
stuff?
So oh, bless you. So
And
she would have been like 5 or 4 or
no,
5.
she was like 3.5, probably
Or
almost
all
4.
3 and a half.
Yeah. So then we were like, okay, so by 5 she was diagnosed. But this is also what was the game changer back then. Diagnosed criteria has changed a bit. So we originally got her diagnosed, and because she was talking at 15 months in full sentences, they deemed her as Asperger's, which gave us no services. So we went back in and we did not mention when she started talking. And then
Oh,
with everything else, and that was a game changer. And this is what I tell parents. I had somebody come in to set us up for services through the state, and she said, I am not the person to be the proud mom to. She said, I'm going to come back in 2 weeks and we're going to redo this. And she said, and when I ask you a question about your child, if they can't do it, every time you ask
time.
them 100% of the time with 100% follow through, your answer is no.
Right. And we've been through that too. We've worked with a mom that she said we just barely missed the diagnosis, and that was your question. Your question was, how did you answer those questions?
Yeah.
Go back and ask to answer them again.
Yeah.
Because I think that truly it is definitely not your time to be the proud mom. It is a time for you to go, okay, I need help with this child. And the only way I'm going to get help is if I show what I saw last Tuesday when they were having a fit on the floor. That's what I need to show,
Right.
rather than what you're seeing at other times.
Document that. And I tell moms, I know when you're in the trenches and your kid is screaming and tearing your house apart, it's hard to say,
Right.
okay, what were we doing 5 minutes before this started? But it doesn't matter. That helped us so much. And with Corey, we've realized how sensitive like his sense of smell is. We would go into this fabric store that I loved, and every single time we walked in there, he would lose his mind. Even as a baby, I'd be wearing him and he'd be dead asleep, and we'd walk in that store and he would start screaming his head off. And so
Probably from all the glues and stuff, that
it
all the
smelled like
sizing that's in
mold
the
in there.
fabric.
It was like this weird warehousey, like
Oh.
bins, dirty, but they had the best fabric by the pound. So, but finally I went in and I said, Adam, this kid cries every time we go in there. And being on the spectrum, my husband was so helpful. He goes, yeah, Kelly, it smells horrible in here. And I'm like, okay. And then we would go to certain stores, and I'm like, he screams every time we go in here. My husband says, yeah, the lights are buzzing. And I was like, the lights aren't buzzing, honey. And he's like, yes,
Right.
they are. And I'm like,
Right.
okay. So yeah, when you're on the spectrum, the lights are buzzing. So
It's funny because Harry would say all sorts of things, and I'd be like, really? Like I, for the longest time, I don't know if any of you watch the show Psych. It's not on anymore, but he would think that he was the psychic detective which is like on the show, because he would pick up on things that other people wouldn't generally pick up on, but then he would miss something that was like right in front of his face. But he would pick up on all of the like lights are buzzing, where we parked, things that were sensory overload to him, where he's very sensory avoiding. Those are the things he always picked up on. But the obvious, like what was in front of the face, no.
and I want to mention before I forget, because people that have multiple children feel that they need to everybody needs to have the same thing. That's not how
Mhm.
life works. And I tell everybody, fair's where you get cotton candy. Everybody
Right.
gets what
Love
they
it.
need, not what they want. Because, and then there's times like we'll go somewhere. When they were little, we had all of them. I would take some of the kids somewhere, and I wouldn't take Corey with. That's how we started with respite. I didn't want respite. I was like, nope, all my kids get the same thing, and I would never leave him with someone else, and blah blah blah. And then finally, I was like, okay,
Are
let's
any
try this.
attached moms listening and hearing Kelly?
Yeah, right. I was this attached mom, and how dare I leave my child with another
Right.
human? What if he needs to look at me? Like, and so, which is so ridiculous. I I don't know
Yeah,
what I thought
scarred for life,
anymore.
Kelly. Can't
Yeah,
look at you all the time.
yeah. This is how your children end up like in their 30s living in your basement. So, um, hey, they've moved out. We make this joke because this is my life, but my deeply attached children have now flown the coop.
Well,
So, but it took a while. And it took for me to understand that. But when we started respite, I had to realize, and we had this amazing respite worker. I literally prayed and manifested her into my life, and she's still a dear friend. But she said, "Kelly, did you ever think that maybe Corey doesn't want to go there?" And I thought, "Oh." She said, "But why would your other kids miss out?" She said, "He's going to stay with me and we're going to have fun and do these things that he enjoys.
right,
So
right,
go
right,
take the other kids." We were going to the skate rink.
right.
And so I was like, "Oh, okay." Like it's okay. And I tell parents, it's okay. Not everybody enjoys the same thing. My husband will go to the music store for hours. I can't think of anything more horrible in my entire life than to go to Guitar Center. Like there is nothing in me that wants to do that. And I had to look at my children and say, maybe this one wants to go to the movies and maybe this one wants to stay home and play Legos. And
Sounds
that's
like a Dr. Seuss
okay.
book. Could you in a car?
Right. Yeah, and it's okay to utilize those respite. And if you're, blessed enough to have family that, will watch them or things like that. So because they don't want to do things.
Right. And I think too, a lot of, I don't know if it's across the board, if all states have respite. I don't think all do, but you got to find out. You've got to find out. And I
Very
know in
rarely
other
have I found
countries,
no.
really, other countries too, it seems like we did some research for some people a while back, and you were able to find respite for people that don't even live in the United States in their area. It totally depends on for sure where you are,
But there's
but
also private people don't realize that there are some moms. I'm also what is called a trauma mama. So I have
right,
children that have come from horrific trauma backgrounds.
right,
There's we're all over. And a lot of us will trade kind of like babysitting because we get it. We get
right.
reactive attachment disorder. We get feel out, we get all these things. And so we will, have kids come stay in our home for a weekend so moms can get a
Mhm.
break or whatever. We'll trade off or we'll do, I've done respite care for moms that have, done that they do some gluten-free cooking. So they've done some bake
Mhm.
stuff for me because I don't enjoy baking. I'm not going to pretend like I do. So I would rather bring their child here and entertain
Taking your
them.
wallet card away.
I know between I don't enjoy baking and I don't enjoy knitting. It is
She hates me.
I hate knitting. Oh, I hate knitting. But I love knitted things.
I still love her.
I zero joy in knitting. It's very frustrating for me. But um but I'm still very
Becca here
Waldorf.
says volunteers are waiting hours for their teaching license or college graduation too. They have the training without the license. So you're helping somebody when you are, often when you are seeking respite, because often if they're looking for to finish up their training hours for something, you can get people for that. She also says they no longer have Asperger's as a diagnosis in the DSM for the United States for parental fears. For those looking into a diagnosis, I think it's interesting because Harry's diagnosis was Asperger's later. Man, if they had seen him when he was 7, I don't think they would have said that. But we waited. In our case, we waited. And a lot of it had to do with what I was going through with my ex-husband and where I was at the time and just trying to sort through life and knowing there was something different about him, but not being in the headspace, which is bad. I mean, if I go back now and fix that for sure, but being in the headspace to be able to get that diagnosis. But I knew there was something going on. So I did all the research and I did all the work, and we had friends that were OTs and we had friends that helped. And so he spoke it like his first word was envelope. So he's like an Emily. Like he was really early in that way. But for sure, we had a lot of other things going on. I always tried to make sure we had somebody in our life that had that, had some background in that, so that we were able to get those services or get that help. When I finally got the diagnosis, I got it because I needed my ex-husband to feed him properly, and he wouldn't, and I needed something on a piece of paper so I could hand it to a judge and say, here, this is what's going on, and then the judge could make. So if I could have gone back and waited, or gone back and not waited, I probably would have had an easier time with things. So listen to Kelly.
Because I knew something, and people will tell me, when did you know Corey had autism? And I will tell you, at the hospital.
I knew something was going on with Soraya hospital.
Yeah, at the hospital. They handed me this baby, and I was like, whoa, something's different here. He wouldn't, not only would he not latch, he acted like he was being murdered. Like there was just all these different signs. And as time went on, and I kept saying, something's off, something's off. And we'd hear, oh, well, he doesn't have to talk. He has 4 other siblings. And I'm like, I am not that mom. Like, no. But it helped us because it also separated, what is autism, and I could look at, okay, I have a diagnosis, what is this? Because I can't help work on and help, I can't, we always have a saying, I can't help you be the best you can be, because I didn't want him to be his siblings. I didn't want him to be like anybody else. I wanted him to be as high functioning as he could be.
Right.
So, and I couldn't do that without that diagnosis and
knowing. Right. Sure.
And that was, 15 years ago. Now the internet's, full of things, and we have, so much where you can look up different therapies, and you can look up all these different things. But I also didn't, our world didn't stop and revolve around Corey being autistic. We utilized
such a huge distinction.
So, and my older kids will tell you that they are thankful for that they still got to be, that, and they love him. My children are incredibly close, but our world didn't stop, and we didn't do everything in our day just to revolve around Corey. And I think that
and I think that's an important distinction too, because I think that especially if it's your oldest child, it's hard to sort of make those boundaries. But you can't. You have to give those other children their individual space.
And there is a syndrome for that. And I will warn people now that have other children and their other children's needs are being met. They're called glass children, because they are seen through, because everybody's only seeing the child with the highest needs. Right. So that's where
and that goes for anything. That goes for anything. Absolutely. Where you've got something else going with another child.
Absolutely.
And it's like systemic, whether it be therapy or anything. There's lots of different lots of different.
And then I was the mom, well, let's try this and let's try this and then I was wearing myself out, and I said, let's find some easy routes for things that just don't matter. Like, we had feeding specialists and stuff, and they were like, my husband was like, well, Corey needs to eat this. And I said, well, you don't eat that. And he was like, oh, that's true. Because he was trying to make Corey eat something one day. So I went to the fridge and I grabbed a thing of applesauce and I put on a spoon and I handed it to my husband, and he said, I hate the texture of this. And I said, uh-huh. I said, I bet Corey does too. And so
that's really funny.
A lot of dads,
applesauce was Harry's like jam for the longest time, but it's so funny. Kids are so funny.
5 things and they were all beige, and he would only eat chicken nuggets from McDonald's, and I was like, we're not eating this. So I went to McDonald's and I talked to the manager and I explained my situation, and he gave me a whole sleeve of McNugget boxes. So I would just put grocery store McNuggets in these boxes. and it worked.
You got to come up with hacks and be okay to ask questions. You have to be. I remember we were in a spot where it was when the first, it wasn't Cold Stone. It was before Cold Stone was like a chain. So it was like a more local place that did the same thing that Cold Stone does, where they mix in your stuff for your ice cream. And we were dairy free. And so I went, we weren't all dairy free. Harry was dairy free. So we all were dairy free. And so I went in there and I just said, listen, can I just bring you And at the time it was Soy Dream. Now we wouldn't do that. It would have been something else. But I said, can I just bring this into you? And he was like, you bring it, I'll give you the mix-ins and then you take it home. He didn't charge us, he just charged us for the mix-ins. He just put it all together because and that was a long time ago. Now they have a dairy-free ice cream in there. But forever ago they didn't have that. And so we had to ask, and in asking, we educated others. In asking, we helped other people see that hey, this is going on. So that guy at McDonald's probably was then like, oh, okay, the next time I see somebody that has autism, I'm going to remember Kelly. I'm going to remember that conversation I had with her.
Right. And it does, it helps, everybody in the community, and especially when you're open. I've had parents that, I know their child is on the spectrum, or I know their child has reactive attachment disorder, and they are so like embarrassed, and there's no reason. I have 8 children now. I am very honest in our journey. We had 9 children at one time. I've had a child so mentally ill that by law she was not allowed to be around other children, not just my children, other children. And so I had an adoption that we had to disrupt. So I have been in the deepest of trenches.
She has been in some
A child that literally tried to kill us.
right.
So, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. We all have our own journey, and these children are all on their own journey also. But
They are.
to acknowledge that and say, my youngest child has fetal alcohol. When I say that, my husband always tells everybody, Kelly wouldn't quit drinking. I'm like, oh, be quiet. But so we got him when he was 2. He thinks he's hilarious. But yeah,
I want to say really fast over here. One mom says, she says, that's brilliant. Cinnamon square spades here. Spare Domino's boxes for home cooked cheese and tomato pizzas. Yes. We even are sure to knock at the door before the pizza is ready. That's hilarious and such a good idea.
Juice containers. I have saved all kinds of containers. Macaroni and cheese. My child thought he was eating Kraft macaroni and cheese for probably 2.5 years. And I was not buying. It was Annie's. We would just dump it in the box.
Right. Because they get so like, this is what it has to be. And it's funny because definitely not everybody is like Rain Man. I mean, for those, I'm dating myself, but that's a good movie to watch too, because it allows you to see like the repetition, the constant repetition. And
that was my experience with autism. That was all I knew before our child was diagnosed. The internet was around, but it wasn't like it is now. And autism wasn't prevalent as it is now. So I was in a mom group when AOL had groups. So this is how old I am. So AOL had groups, and I had a mom friend in there, and she had twins, and they were on the spectrum. And so I looked that up because I wanted to know what she was dealing with. And that's how I was like, this is my child. And so I printed out the checklist, and I took it to our pediatrician and said, okay, this is Corey.
Let's do something. This is
Corey.
Right.
And so that's how we started on our journey. But there's a lot of information out there now, and there's a lot of help, but you have to be willing to accept it, and you have to sort out what's autism, what's sensory, what's this. And I tell everybody, because I said, look around your family. When Corey was diagnosed, and then Adam was diagnosed, and my husband was diagnosed because we would be reading something about Corey, and Adam would say, well, that's not weird, I do that. Well, that's not weird, I do that. I was like, this is answering a lot of questions for me. And then we started, and then he was diagnosed. He went and officially got diagnosed as an adult. And then we started looking through his family, and you could see it. And even his grandfather laughed. He said, I feel like I'm kind of like the captain of all of this.
The captain of the autistic
and
ship, right here.
They're probably before you. There were generations.
I look at my ex-husband's family, and my ex-husband for sure, which I always sort of wondered, but it wasn't until we were in like reunification therapy after our last trip through court. She was like, yep, there's definitely something more than ADHD going on here. And his brother, like, remember him, Eric? Like his brother, totally something going on. And I know my ex-father-in-law. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole family. Eric's like, the whole family.
Well, we have 8 children. 3 I came with that my husband adopted. We have 3 biologically together, and then we have 2 that came from foster care. All 3 of our children together are on the spectrum. So I always laugh because, and we knew when we had Paige, everybody said, "Are you worried?" I said, "No, I'm just assuming. Like, we'll just assume that she's going to be on the spectrum. And if she's not, then great. And if she is, then no
Then
surprises."
I'll make, yeah.
Another really good movie I like is Mozart and the Whale. And people have no idea about this movie. It is phenomenal. It's a man that has autism, and he runs a support group, and he meets a woman in his support group, and it shows them like dating and the relationships and stuff of people on the spectrum. And if you are married to somebody on the spectrum, this will make you'll be like, "Oh, geez, yeah." It's
I'll have to look for that one.
But it was also really neat for me to see, and I know it's a movie, but to imagine my children in a relationship and things like that.
Right,
And
right. Because that's a whole other, I mean, so you've got, Emily is betrothed.
yes,
Almost.
yeah, it's almost
Um,
officially, but yes. And I had to tell her, I
and
said, "Did you tell him?" I said, "Did you tell when they were dating?" I said, "Did you tell that boy that you're on the spectrum?" And she was like, "No." And I was like, "Well, I'm sure he'll figure it out." But I said, "But honey, you should probably like mention it or whatever." And he knows now. And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I was like,
right, right.
"But I think he's on the
Well, I
spectrum."
wouldn't
So
know.
it works
I
out
wouldn't
well.
know it if I just met Emily on the street. I wouldn't know that. Because I know her well, then that makes it a little bit different. But I think it's interesting when we start to watch them sort of go out into the world more, get jobs, get attracted to other people, and then sort of be in this place of how do they navigate that, and how are they, because they are often so socially awkward, that it's a really good thing that Corey has a job. That, I think, that greased the wheels for Harry. He
Yes.
spent 2 years at Legoland, and so he didn't just have a job. He had a job where he had to talk to people. And we went there one time when he was working. It was so weird because it was definitely not the Harry we knew at home. Like, he
Right.
was dancing, and I was like, "Who is this kid?" And so it greases the wheels for them socially to sort of be in that place and really get to experiment without us around.
And
And
that's
then
the
Harry served a
problem.
mission for our church for 2 years. So that was this whole other education for him in how people act.
And that's the problem with being a helicopter parent. You don't give them these opportunities
Right.
for them to thrive. It was terrifying for me for Corey to get a job.
Oh, yes.
It was, but I kept that to myself, and and he's thrived. It was horrible for me to send him to scout camp that first year. I actually made Adam go the first year.
Oh,
But
Harry almost died at scout camp. So, yes.
well, I made Adam go the first year, and Adam's sending me pictures of Corey eating like a sloppy Joe, and I was like, "Excuse me? Like,
Who is
I've
this kid?
been a short order cook for 12 years, and he's like, "Oh, I'm enjoying all these things that my mother has tried to feed me, and I wouldn't." And that was the moment I realized I'm not doing this anymore. This kid is going to learn how to fly, and he did. But my kids are really open. My husband's work knows that he is autistic, and we have
Mhm.
that debate, because I'll say, "Oh, my husband's
Right. Like, who
autistic," and they're
should you
like,
tell? Should you tell employers? And
"Should
right.
you tell him?" Or that, or people will get on me, on Facebook, because everybody likes to yell at each other on Facebook, and they'll tell me, "Well, your child or your husband has autism," and I said, "No, my husband and children they are autistic. It is part of who make them, just like they are brunette, just like they are, these other things. It is part
Right.
of
We
who."
have to be honest about that.
Yeah, it is part of what makes them who they are, and it just is what it is, and they own that. And that didn't come from me. That came from my husband and Emily, because they were like, "I'm really tired of people saying that I have autism, like something's wrong with me." They say it like, "Oh, like it's something bad."
Right.
And so Emily also has epilepsy, and she said, "I don't think that my autism is at the same level my epilepsy." She said, "My epilepsy sucks, and it, will take up part of." She said, "My autism just makes me who I am." And those are all great things, and I wanted them to have that mindset. And,
For
and it's
sure.
frustrating, and it's, these things, but
Right.
it's just part of it also makes them, incredibly great in other things. My
There
husband,
are things that they can do that we can't.
yeah,
They can
absolutely.
multitask at things that we will never be able to do.
Yeah, they are so organized, and my husband is this amazing, and accountant, and he's so into detail. So we always find the
Yeah,
positive.
he's very meticulous.
He does photography now that is mind blowing because he is so into detail and he captures
Mhm.
things that other people just didn't see.
Don't see. I think that's great. One of the things that I was reading a while back is that there are employers now that are looking for people with autism
Yes.
because they know that they can trust them for certain things. And like in Harry's job, Harry's a transit cop. His sergeants all like it is something that he, they're looking for there because they know he is going to pay attention to detail. They know that he's going to give accurate, an accurate depiction of what happened because, um, just of that attention to detail. One thing I want to talk about because we're running out of time is how did that, because you've had Corey at home and Emily at home homeschooling with Waldorf,
Mhm.
and I had Harry at home, and you've got Paige too. So how did them being on the autism spectrum, how did that affect your homeschooling?
Um, the low media helped a ton
Mhm.
because they
Same
would,
here.
they would just let Corey would sit in front
So
of me.
like moss to the flame. It could
Yes,
be like
that,
it could be that stupid thing that's just screensaver of fireplace, and they would still stare.
yes, and that's also with my child with fetal alcohol.
Oh, right.
It's any of those, how those brains are wired. Having a really strong rhythm, a very strong rhythm. And those first years were hard. And I tell this, there were no, like, these are what we do. We didn't allow for these impromptu things. Now we can be a little more flexible, but it gave
Right.
them that security because a lot of these meltdowns come because they don't know what to expect next. They don't know that, and they can't be like that. My husband hates impromptu things. Emily and Corey, they needed to know on Monday we were doing this. On Tuesday we were doing this. They
Rhythm is so huge for all children, but children on the spectrum, I would probably venture to say any special needs, they
Yes.
need to know that they have that concrete rhythm all the time. Otherwise, they don't know how to act.
Right, and especially kids on the spectrum, well, and especially ones that are dealing with sensory stuff because they're already so overloaded with sensory
Right.
things that any kind of peace you can bring in is so needed. So having a really strong rhythm, and my kids loved those visuals. They loved,
Right.
having a,
A
something
chart.
up that said some kind of chart
Right.
that said this is what we're doing next.
Your kids on the spectrum will keep you on that rhythm because once they get it and they know that this is what they want and this is what they need, they'll be like, Mom, we're supposed to be doing something else right now. We're not going on a walk. What's going on?
And Paige would know what day it was before she knew what day it was by what the
That's
house
right.
smelled like because we did
Oh.
like a scent of the day. So she knew whatever essential oil I had or whatever incense I
Mhm.
had. She could tell you what day it was by what the house smelled like when she woke up.
That's great.
So, and they
That's great.
cling into those and those traditions and those festivals. And these are things that bring them so much comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Agreed.
and I know a
Agreed.
lot of people now, like, minimalism's a big thing. um, Marie Kondo magic of
Right.
tidying up is a big thing. Those were some other things that they enjoyed doing. We had a day where we would clean, and they thrive on things being organized. They thrive on as little chaos as possible because they already have so much chaos coming at them with all the sensory things and just everything else that's going on in their mind that they need as much calm and peacefulness as possible.
You do. So I think Waldorf is such a balm for their soul. I mean, it's a balm for everybody's soul, but honestly, kids on the spectrum or special needs kids, they need that. They need that extra piece. They need that extra piece of like this is it's calm, it's rhythmic, and your main lessons. You're connecting with them through main lessons where they are often disconnecting on purpose for their whatever sensory things they have going on. But that main lesson time is such a good connection, and it's you and them. and which is what they often are seeking. If they have to be with somebody else, they want to be with you. So having that time to, at least that was our experience, having that time to really dial in, like, this is your main lesson, we're taking that time together, was very jealously guarded, at least for Harry. And there were things he hated doing, like he hated painting. We painted anyway. We may not have painted as much, but we painted anyway because he needed to learn how to have some control, and he needed to learn how to have some will. And he's also my best knitter. He's my best knitter.
And there's a lot of things you can do. I've talked to a lot of moms, and they're like, well, we can't do Waldorf because, my child, I have kids with dysgraphia. My lesson books do not look like these beautiful,
Right.
pieces of art, because it is physically painful for my children to draw. But we still bring in other things, and then we still make allowances for other things. Main lesson time and those times where we're sitting doing schoolwork, we accomplish more OT things than our OT that would come in. And we had one-on-one OT in our house. But we get more accomplished. And there's so many things that Waldorf brought in. Beeswax,
Right. It's so sensory calming.
all these things. And I hear moms, well, my child can't sit there, they don't want to sit there. I'm like, I have the world's worst ADHD. I don't want to sit there. You know how hard it was for me to come from radically unschooling to a mom that like lights a candle and sits at the table with some crayons? Like, I get it. Nobody in this house struggled more than me. Like, so, but we have used, foot swings on our chairs. We have used wiggles. I have more tools than you could possibly give me an excuse for.
A lot of tools.
So
she has a lot of tools.
Yeah, if you tell me we can't do this, because I will give you 10 things of how you can do that. But it's the minute that you stop having a problem for every solution is when that you start taking control back of your home.
Right. You have to ask yourself if you are an asshole.
Yes.
Which is not different. It's very different than the thing that has two S's. Ask, ASKHO. Sorry, I said, oh, Mary, are you saying something bad? Nope. Asshole is way different.
It's way different. But yeah, do not
to ask yourself if that's you. If you are constantly like looking for another solution rather than going, oh, wait a minute, I have a solution right here in front of me. It might not be one that I want, but I'm going to try it because it's a solution.
And there's times where I have cried, but I don't want to do this. I am tired. I have no interest in this. It would just be so much easier for me to turn on the TV and we can all be unschooled and watch YouTube videos. Yeah. And all this. But that is not going to benefit anybody. And it's not going to benefit me. And I've seen that. I don't have babies anymore. My youngest is 12. And my oldest will be 30 this year. So I have done this a very long time, and I've done it all. Everybody's like, "Oh, did you start at Waldorf?" Nope. We started in a public school, then we moved to a charter school, then we moved to homeschooling, and we were radically unschoolers, and then I knew that we needed something stronger, and then we bought these horrible curriculums that were like, I think the Duggars used them. They were so like, they were awful. They just were awful. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They were horrible. And so my kids were bored and it was crazy. And we had these, it was a lot. So I've run the gamut of everything. And then we found Waldorf because I was such an attachment parent that I needed something else, but my kids needed something different. And so it was just such a good fit for us. And it brought so much healing into our home because it forced us to look at our rhythm and forced us to be more connected. And that's what, these kids need.
Yeah, that's what they need for sure. Because I think one thing, it's really easy as an attached parent when you have a child with autism to either be overly attached to them or to be not attached enough, to disconnect. And it because it's different with this child than it is with other children. Nicola says, how did homeschooling change with bigger kids in high school? Go ahead. You answer first and then I'll answer.
Okay. For us, it started switching to more career plans. What, what are you want to
Yeah.
do? Let's start looking at what we need to do, whether we started with um, doing some hands-on, like,
What's the end? We had like, what was the end in mind?
yeah,
Having,
what is the end in mind? So, do you want to start apprenticing with, a tradesperson? What interests you? So
right.
we would start taking them out to, like, to different places and trying to work with different my first son is 25 now, and so he's very hands-on. He is not a sit at a desk, do paperwork
Right.
kind of kid. He is severely ADHD. And so we knew that he was going to require some kind of hands-on job. So and all my kids graduate by 16. So they have either gone to a community college, or they have gone into some kind of work that they love.
Mhm.
So,
That's good. I think
um,
that's good. With
but a
Harry,
lot.
we had oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go on. Go ahead.
I was just going to say with Harry, we had just moved to San Diego, and I'm pretty big on, like, you need to know where you live. And so we have a really good transit system here. And so got him a transit pass, and he got to know San Diego. He spent a lot of time before he went to work for Legoland, because he had to be 16. So he was like 15, it seems like, when we moved here, and almost 16. And so before he could get a job, I said, this is what we're doing. I want you to know where you're from. I want you to know, where you live. I want you to know what great things are here. So those were very experiential that he would have shied away from otherwise because of having autism. He would have been like, that's right, I don't need to know what's going on at the zoo. That's all right, I don't need to know what's going on at the museum. But I gave him assignments like that because they needed him to know how to get around, for one, because he refuses to drive. Your husband's watching us. Hi, Adam.
I saw that.
Uh, so he refused to drive. So no, he must have been 16 when we moved here. I can't remember that, or something. Anyway, so we had to look at what was our goal. What was our goal? What did he want? What did he want to do for his life, for a living? And, like, what was the goal? And so we tailored, and I did this with my neurotypical children too. We tailored what was going on in Waldorf High School to what the end was supposed to be. And that's what they would have done in a Waldorf High School. In many cases, they would have looked at sort of where you want to end up. And they have, in a Waldorf High School, they have masters in what they do that teach them. And so when you're homeschooling, you have to seek that out. You have to decide, okay, where is it that you want to be? Because you can't live here forever. So what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And so we did a lot of tailoring of that plan for him, and definitely still did, like, for us, we still did the main lesson blocks, but we did a lot of really making sure that everything that he did, like, followed this plan he had for himself. And thank goodness we did, because I look at these kids, I don't know about yours, but what I notice about my kids that have spectrum issues going on, they are keen manifestors.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
and I know, and we could all learn something from them. Harry, when he was 6, wanted to be a train operator. That's all he wanted to do, and work at Legoland. And when he announced this, we lived in Idaho. He'd never been to Legoland. He'd never seen Legoland. In his mind, it was just like, there's this place where that's all there is Legos. And that was what he wanted. So then when we went to Legoland when he was like 12, 14, he was like, this is it. I want to be a ride operator at Legoland. We moved to San Diego. When we first went to Legoland, we didn't know we were moving to San Diego. We moved to San Diego. He worked at Legoland for 2 years. Now he's in running to be a train operator. So they are keen manifestors, even if it's long haul. So be careful. Soraya, like, she'll draw a picture of something, then she has it the next day.
Yeah.
She's really good. She's
And
like
that's
major manifester.
and Emily, her life is exactly what she's wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
for her being on the spectrum, and then having younger siblings that were on the spectrum and younger siblings that had other diagnosis, she knew that she wanted to use her own struggles, because she also has some severe anxiety and some OCD. And she now is what is called a trainer. We have a thing called post high. So it's special needs kids that have graduated high school, but they still are allowed to be in the school program till they're 21. And they teach them life skills and job skills and things like that. And she's now a teacher for these other special needs kids.
That's amazing.
And so, but she, in high school, we knew she was interested in that. She said, I want to be some kind, I want to work
I remember.
with people with special needs. Corey, his whole life, has loved nothing but movies. I mean, movies were his
work at theater?
be all. He works in a movie theater. And when he said, I'm going to get a job and I will not work fast food. And I said, well, all right. Because, most,
right.
That's where
most
people
teenagers
start.
Right.
And I thought, okay, well, good luck to you. And he did. He got a job at the theater, and he can tell
That's great.
you about, every movie ever. But when I say strong rhythm, I need moms to understand, like, there's a strong rhythm. I have had a kid in a therapeutic hold and still taught a lesson. Like,
Right.
still,
it doesn't, like, you have to sort that piece out. You have to sort out it being a constant disruption and it not being a constant disruption.
Right.
Sometimes you're the disruption. That's what what I found very early on. Sometimes it's me that's the disruption, because I went through this with you, and now I'm just going to have to go have a mental health day the rest of the day. No, you have to
you can't
know how to put yourself back together again.
And
you have to be able to move on.
Yeah. And I tell everybody, we reset our day, whether it's at 7:30 in the morning or it's at 2 in the afternoon. I will pull everybody. We'll stop what we're doing. We'll reset our day and start over. But I have literally had a raging child in a therapeutic hold on one part of my lap, and at the other one been helping somebody with math. And then I just and I thought, I can sit and I could cry and be like, this is awful. Like, this is horrible. And instead I just laugh because it's so ridiculous. Because there's days, there's days that are so ridiculous, but you can't cry. You can't, like, it's not going to benefit everybody if you shut down.
Right. No, I agree. Totally agree. Becca has a question here. She says, when the root is anxiety and sensory, how do you combat back talking? I absolutely don't allow it, but I'm also looking to give him a replacement to reset him so that he can have a go to calm down prior to running off at the mouth. He's 4.
Oh, in my house, if you can run your mouth, you can run your legs. So
yeah.
they need something to do. I've also had kids that will be cruel to siblings or will say something mean, and I'll tell them, you go in the bathroom mirror and you say that to yourself. And they'll look at me like I'm crazy, but they'll go, and I said, no, I want you to go in there and what you just said, say that to yourself and see what that looks like. And they're like, and they'll come back and apologize, and I won't hear it again. But there's so much big muscle work. So if you want to be, you're so busy that you have to backtrack, and especially kids that are sensory seeking. The majority of that backtalk is coming from sensory seeking, which is causing a panic attack, which is causing a big circle. So we have logs in the backyard. We have logs in the wheelbarrow. And it's funny because I had a friend come over one day and they said, oh, is Bradley building something? And I said, no, why? And they said, he's just moving those logs. And I said, yeah, he's literally just moving those logs. And the next time he needs something to do, he'll move them to the other side of the yard.
We had a situation yesterday, and this is totally a sensory thing. I had kind of had it, and Soraya was like, that's usually when it happens. Usually when I've had it, she's like, oh, it's time for me to turn on. And it had just been going on and on. And so then Daddy came home. He was off visiting somebody. He came home, and she's very sensory seeking, very sensory seeking. He just started asking her questions. Totally changed because she was no longer seeking, like, I have to find it. Mm-hmm. She was allowing him to converse with her, and it totally changed the outcome, and totally changed how she was then seeking that sensory, and because he was asking her questions that made her think. It wasn't just mindless talk. It was, he asked her questions that made her think. So your sensory seeker, ask them questions, because I think that that's helping. It helps them stop with whatever loop they are in and start forming a slower loop. because they get into that. They get into the sensory ones, especially. We'll get into this loop that goes on and on and on and on. You've got to be able to slow the loop down and input something else.
Well, and we do that when we see it escalating. I'll pull a child and I'll set a timer on my phone, and we have a bin of different sensory things. And so I'll set it down and I have these questions I ask, why, what, what do you need? What's going on? Why do you feel like that? What do you need? And so we talk it through together while they mold clay or they play with spinners or these other fidget things we have or whatever they grab out of the box. Or there's times where we'll stop what we're doing and I'll put them at the table, and I always have shaving cream here. I will buy it by the caseload at the Dollar Tree, and I will just pour shaving cream all over the table. And the minute Paige is elbow deep in shaving cream, she is like a different kid. She totally just relaxes and she's fine. We have a bin of cloud dough that has lavender in it. We do that. I will stop what we're doing and we will start doing some yoga stuff. I actually went and got trained in kids yoga so I could just stop what we were doing. But Cosmic Kids Yoga on YouTube is phenomenal. Kidding Around Yoga is phenomenal. So it's okay to stop in that moment and say, let's assess the situation. But if you start freaking out and they can see you tense up, they can see you stressed out. So you have to like flip the script. Okay, this isn't working. So let's do something for everybody.
Right. Agreed. We're getting some really good comments here. Becca says, do you have something that's not high in smell?
Cloud dough you can make with absolutely no scents at all.
That would work. Sure.
It's just flour and baby oil. I'll have to look at the thing. But yeah, I add smells to it, but it doesn't have any smell by itself.
Very good. I think this was great. We had a lot of people over on Instagram, and then Instagram shut off. I don't know what was going on there. So I will send them over to watch this as well, because I think this was really helpful. I think we gave a lot of information. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing. She's an expert. So if you have something going on at home and you need some help, she is definitely the person to talk to. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye.
Bye.